My name is Christan Gill. I am the author of Strange Fruit, Uncelebrated Narratives from Black History, and Tales of the Talented 10th, Bass Reeves, which will be out in September. That's coming up this fall. Well, most of the stories that I write are about obscure Black history, so stories that you wouldn't necessarily hear about in history books. I've done stories about they're sort of eclectic and eccentric stories. My stories are typically stories that people don't necessarily hear about if you read a history book. What I usually do is I try to know as much as I possibly can, so I will read as much information as I possibly can and take notes on the story. Once I get through that process, I try to develop an idea about where the story is going to start. So with Bass Reeves, the obvious place for the Bass Reeves story was where he got into the fight with his slave owner and knocked him out. He punched the slave owner and ran to go to Indian Territory. So his early life is, it's Bass Reeves and he's a kid and he's learning to shoot, and then he gets into a fight with his slave master when he's a young adult, when he's in his 20s, and he punches him and goes to Indian Territory. So that's the spark of the story. So that's where I start, and then sort of build the rest of the story around it. Then I go from that stage. I start doing thumbnails, which are really little small drawings that are like hieroglyphics. I always tell my students that thumbnails are the key to world peace. If everybody sat down and did thumbnails before they made decisions, nobody would make bad decisions.
Really?
So I went through that process, and then after that I do a larger thumbnail where I settle on the drawings. So that's when I get photo references and try to figure out how to, what the horses look like, how the horses are running, those kind of things. And then I go from there and I take a photograph of it, and then I send that photograph to I have a digital Wacom Cintiq.
Yeah.
So I draw on the Cintiq. So I take the picture of it, I blow up the thumbnail, and then I draw directly over top of it. Most of the finish is electronic, but all of the preparation is all paper.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so I start within a sketchbook, and then I make it. I have two sketchbooks. I have a little sketchbook where I put my ideas. I have a bigger sketchbook where I work out those ideas, and then I have a final sketchbook which is just the stories. So I prefer books, but I'm not against electronic things.
Of course.
I read web comics and I read comics on my tablets all the time. So I don't necessarily say I would prefer those things. I prefer to work that way, where it's paper to digital. But
it's a trend.
Yeah, it's a trend. But I don't do many web comics but it's the way people are going. So I wouldn't be upset if my books were all suddenly just digital books. I wouldn't be upset about that. I think libraries can help me by understanding this thing that I think I've come to understand because it's something my sister said to me one day, which is 28 days are not enough. Black history is not a 28-day month. It's something that should be embedded in every aspect of American history, because it's not just, these stories can't be told in England. These stories can't be told in Europe. These can't be told in South America. They can't be told in Africa. They're not even remotely the same. They are American stories. And once we realize that they are American stories, LGBT community stories, like women's stories, these stories are all things that only happen in America. And so separating those things, Native American history, separating those things out is so unfair to the people.
It's American history.
It's American history. It's not, American history and Dr. King and his accomplishments, and there's still things people don't know about Dr. King, is really, really great, but these stories are about people who actually did what a lot of people say you should do as an American. Pull yourself up, do what you have to do, push through and survive. And we don't talk about that a lot. We just talk about the civil rights movement or the Civil War, freeing the slaves, those kind of things. And so I think it's just important for librarians and everybody to remember that 28 days are not enough.